The Mafia boss orders an ugly, dirty, homeless woman a bath. The before and after paralyzed the entire city. Nobody in Chicago could have predicted what was about to happen. Not the police, not the politicians, not even the man who gave the order himself. Because when Vincent Castellano, the most feared name on the South Side, stopped his black Mercedes in the middle of a freezing January morning and stared at the woman sleeping against a dumpster, he had no idea he was about to set off a chain of events that would shake the foundations of everything he had built. The woman looked like she had been forgotten by the world. Her hair was matted into thick, tangled ropes that hung past her shoulders, crusted with dirt and debris. Her face was hidden beneath layers of grime so thick that her actual features were impossible to distinguish. She wore at least 4 coats, all torn, all stained, wrapped around her body like armor against the bitter wind. Her shoes were held together with duct tape, and she smelled. Even from inside the car, Vincent could smell her. A combination of garbage and sweat and something else, something that reminded him of decay. His driver, a massive man named Tony, who had been with him for 15 years, glanced in the rearview mirror. "Boss, everything okay?" Vincent did not answer. He was staring at the woman, watching her chest rise and fall in shallow breaths, watching the way she clutched a torn plastic bag against her body like it contained something precious. He had seen 1,000 homeless people in his life. Chicago was full of them, especially in winter when they gathered near the heating vents and huddled in doorways. He had never stopped for any of them, not once. But something about this woman made him unable to look away. "Pull over," he said. Tony's eyebrows shot up. "Here?" "Boss, we got the meeting with the Santini brothers in 20 minutes. They're not gonna—" "I said pull over." The car slowed to a stop. Vincent opened his door and stepped out into the cold, his Italian leather shoes crunching against the frozen slush on the sidewalk. The wind cut through his cashmere coat immediately, and he pulled it tighter around his body as he approached the woman. She did not wake up. She did not move at all, except for those shallow breaths, in and out, like she was barely clinging to life. Vincent crouched down beside her. Up close, she was even worse than he had thought. Her hands were covered in sores. Her fingernails were black with filth, and her face, what he could see of it beneath the dirt, was gaunt and hollow, the face of someone who had not eaten properly in months. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey, wake up." The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were brown, he noticed, a deep, rich brown that seemed completely out of place in such a ruined face. For a moment, she just stared at him, confusion swimming in those brown eyes. Then fear took over, and she scrambled backward, pressing herself against the dumpster like she was trying to disappear into it. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, broken. "Please, I wasn't doing anything. I'll move. I'll go somewhere else. Just please don't hurt me." Vincent held up his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." She did not believe him. Of course she did not believe him. He was wearing a coat that cost more than most people made in a month. He had a car worth more than most people's houses. And she had probably been hurt by men who looked just like him more times than she could count. "What's your name?" Vincent asked. The woman shook her head. I don't want any trouble. I'm not giving you trouble. I'm asking your name." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, so quietly he almost did not hear it, she said, "Margaret. My name is Margaret." Margaret. Vincent repeated the name, turning it over in his mouth like he was tasting it. "Margaret, when was the last time you ate?" She did not answer. She did not have to. The answer was written all over her skeletal frame, her sunken cheeks, the way her hands trembled even though she was trying to hide them beneath her coats. Vincent stood up and pulled out his wallet. He removed every bill inside, there had to be at least $2,000, and held it out to her. Margaret stared at the money like it was a snake about to bite her. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Vincent said. "I don't want anything from you." But even as he said the words, he knew they were not entirely true, because he did want something from her. He wanted to understand why, After 53 years of not caring about anyone but himself and his organization, he had suddenly stopped his car for a homeless woman who smelled like death. Margaret did not take the money. She just kept staring at it, her brown eyes filled with a mixture of hope and terror that made Vincent's chest ache in a way he did not understand. "Take it," he said. "Get yourself some food, get a room somewhere, get warm." "I can't," she whispered. "I can't take that much. You don't understand, I can't." "Why not?" "Because then you'll want something. They always want something. And I can't do that anymore, I won't." Vincent felt something shift inside him, something he had not felt in years, maybe decades. It took him a moment to recognize it, and when he did, it surprised him more than anything else that had happened that morning. It was shame. He was ashamed. Ashamed that this woman, this broken, forgotten woman, had been so damaged by the world that she could not accept kindness without expecting cruelty in return. Ashamed that he was part of the world that had done this to her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again, and this time his voice was different, softer, almost gentle. "I'm not going to ask you for anything. I just want to help you." Margaret laughed. It was a horrible sound, dry and cracked, like leaves crunching underfoot. "Nobody helps people like me," she said. "Nobody even sees people like me." "I see you," Vincent said. And for some reason he could not explain, those 3 words felt like the most honest thing he had said in years. Tony was getting out of the car now, looking nervous. "Boss, we really gotta go, the Santini's." "Cancel it," Vincent said without turning around. "Cancel it. Boss, you can't just cancel a meeting with the Santini's. They'll think—" "I don't care what they think." Vincent turned to look at his driver, and something in his eyes made Tony take a step backward. "Cancel the meeting, and call Rosa. Tell her to get the guest suite ready." Tony's mouth fell open. "The guest suite? You mean at your house?" "Boss, you can't be serious." "Do I look like I'm joking?" Tony swallowed hard. In 15 years of working for Vincent Castellano, he had never seen his boss look like this. There was something in his eyes, something fierce and determined, and almost desperate, like he was fighting a battle that only he could see. "No, boss," Tony said quietly. "You don't look like you're joking at all." Vincent turned back to Margaret. She was still pressed against the dumpster, still clutching her plastic bag, still looking at him like he was some kind of trap waiting to spring shut. "I'm going to take you somewhere warm," Vincent said. "Somewhere safe. You can take a bath, get some clean clothes, eat a real meal. And then, if you want to leave, you can leave. No strings attached, no expectations, I give you my word." Margaret's brown eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, looking for the catch. She had been on the streets for 8 years. She had learned to read people the way others read books, and what she saw in Vincent Castellano's face did not match anything she had expected. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." Vincent thought about the question. He thought about his mother, who had died when he was 7. He thought about his daughter, who had stopped speaking to him years ago and now lived across the country with a husband he had never met. He thought about all the things he had done in his life, all the people he had hurt, all the lines he had crossed. "Because I'm tired," he said finally. "I'm tired of being the kind of man who walks past people like you without stopping. I'm tired of pretending that nothing matters except money and power. I'm tired of being alone." Margaret stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she loosened her grip on her plastic bag. "You're serious," she said. It was not a question. "I'm serious." She looked down at the money still in his hand, then back up at his face. "I haven't taken a bath in 2 years," she said quietly. "I don't even remember what it feels like to be clean." "Then let me help you remember." For a moment, neither of them moved. The wind howled around them, sending scraps of newspaper skittering across the frozen pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn blared. Then Margaret reached out and took the money. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel, because stories like this, stories that will make you question everything you think you know about people, are exactly what we bring you every single week. Subscribe now so you do not miss what happens next. The drive to Vincent's house took 45 minutes. Margaret sat in the back seat, as far from Vincent as she could get, her plastic bag clutched against her chest like a shield. She did not speak. She barely moved. She just stared out the window at the city passing by, watching the buildings get bigger and more expensive, watching the streets get cleaner and wider, watching the world transform into something she had not seen in years. Vincent watched her watching. He wondered what she was thinking. He wondered what it must be like to go from sleeping against a dumpster to riding in a Mercedes with heated leather seats. He wondered if she was planning to run the moment the car stopped. He would not blame her if she did. They arrived at his house just before noon. It was a mansion, really, a sprawling three-story building set back from the road behind iron gates and a long circular driveway. Vincent had bought it 15 years ago when his organization had first started making real money. He had thought it would make him happy, owning a house like this. It had not. Rosa was waiting at the front door when they pulled up. She was a small woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. She had been Vincent's housekeeper for 12 years, and she was one of the few people in the world he trusted completely. Her eyes went wide when she saw Margaret step out of the car. "Mr. Castellano," she said carefully, "you did not tell me our guest would need special accommodations." "I didn't know myself until an hour ago." Vincent placed a hand on Margaret's back, gently guiding her toward the house. She flinched at his touch but did not pull away. "Rosa, this is Margaret. She's going to be staying with us for a while. I need you to take care of her." Rosa looked at Margaret, really looked at her, taking in the matted hair and the layers of filthy clothing and the sores on her hands, and something shifted in her expression. The surprise faded, replaced by something softer, something that looked almost like recognition. "Of course," Rosa said. "Come inside, dear, let's get you warm." Margaret hesitated on the threshold. She looked back at Vincent, her brown eyes still filled with uncertainty. "I don't understand," she said. "Why are you doing this? What do you get out of it?" It was a fair question. Vincent had asked himself the same thing 100 times during the drive over, and he still did not have a good answer. "Maybe I just want to do something good for once in my life," he said. "Is that so hard to believe?" Margaret considered this. Then, slowly, she stepped inside. The guest suite was on the second floor. It had its own bathroom, its own sitting area, its own balcony overlooking the garden. Margaret stood in the doorway, staring at the king-size bed with its crisp white sheets and mountain of pillows, and she began to cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just silent tears rolling down her cheeks, cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face. Rosa put a gentle hand on her arm. "There's a bathrobe in the bathroom," she said softly, "and I'll bring up some clothes for you to change into while I run your bath. Take your time. There's no rush." Margaret nodded, but she did not move. She just kept staring at the bed, crying those silent tears, clutching her plastic bag like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. Vincent watched from the hallway, and that unfamiliar feeling in his chest, that shame, that ache, grew stronger. Rosa came to stand beside him. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "What made you stop for her?" Vincent shook his head. "I don't know. I saw her lying there against that dumpster, looking like she was already dead, and I couldn't keep driving. I couldn't pretend I didn't see her." Rosa was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You know what the men will say. They'll think you've gone soft. Let them think what they want. And if they try to use it against you—" Vincent turned to look at his housekeeper, and his eyes were cold again, the eyes of the man who had built an empire on fear and violence. "Then I'll remind them why they should be afraid of me." Rosa nodded slowly. She had seen that look before. She knew what it meant. "I'll take care of her," she said. "She'll be safe here." "Thank you, Rosa." Vincent turned and walked away, heading for his office on the ground floor. He had calls to make, damage to control. Cancelling the meeting with the Santinis had been a mistake. He knew that, even as he gave the order. The pool. Santini brothers were not the kind of men who forgave slights easily. They would want an explanation, and they would not accept "I stopped to help a homeless woman" as a valid reason. But as Vincent sat down at his desk and reached for his phone, he found that he did not care. For the first time in as long as he could remember, the politics of his world, the constant maneuvering and positioning and power plays, felt trivial, meaningless. All he could think about was Margaret's brown eyes and the way they had looked when she saw that bed, like she had forgotten that beauty existed. Upstairs, Rosa had drawn a bath. The bathroom was filled with steam, and the water was hot enough to turn skin pink. She had added some of the expensive bath salts that Vincent kept for his rare visitors, and the air smelled like lavender and eucalyptus. Margaret stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She had not looked at herself, really looked, in years. The face staring back at her was a stranger's face. Hollow cheeks, cracked lips, skin the color of old newspaper. Her hair was so tangled and matted that she could not even see what color it was anymore. She barely recognized herself. Slowly, she began to remove her layers. The first coat, a men's winter jacket she had found in a donation bin 3 years ago. The second coat, a woman's cardigan, moth-eaten and stained. The third coat, a hoodie that had once been blue but was now a muddy grey. The fourth coat, a thin fleece that did almost nothing to keep out the cold, but added one more layer between her body and the world. Beneath the coats, she wore a dress she had been given at a shelter 5 years ago. It had been pretty once, yellow flowers on a white background, but now it was torn and filthy, barely holding together at the seams. She took that off too. And then she stood there, naked and shivering, looking at the body she had tried so hard to forget she had. She was thin, so thin that her ribs stood out like piano keys beneath her skin. Her collarbones jutted forward sharply, and her hip bones protruded at angles that looked almost painful. Her skin was covered in scars, some old, some newer, and her feet were a mess of calluses and blisters and wounds that had never quite healed. But beneath all of that, beneath the damage and the neglect and the years of suffering, she could still see traces of the woman she used to be. The curve of her shoulders, the shape of her hands, the line of her jaw. She used to be beautiful. She had almost forgotten. The bath was calling to her. She could see the steam rising from the water, could smell the lavender, could feel the warmth reaching out to her like an embrace. She stepped into the tub. The heat was almost painful at first. Her body had forgotten what warmth felt like, and it took a moment for her skin to adjust. But then the warmth seeped into her muscles, into her bones, and Margaret let out a sound that was somewhere between a sigh and a sob. She slid down until the water covered her shoulders, until only her head was above the surface, and she closed her eyes and let herself float. For the first time in 8 years, Margaret felt something other than cold, something other than hunger, something other than fear. She felt safe. Downstairs, Vincent was on the phone with his underboss, a man named Frank DeLuca, who had been with the organization even longer than Tony. "I don't understand," Frank was saying, his voice tight, with controlled anger. "You cancelled a meeting with the Santinis to pick up some homeless woman off the street. Are you trying to start a problem? Because this is how you start a problem." "I'll handle the Santinis," Vincent said calmly. "How? They're already asking questions. They think you're disrespecting them. They think you're trying to send some kind of message." "Then tell them the truth. Tell them I had a personal emergency." "A personal emergency?" Frank's laugh was sharp and humorless. "What personal emergency? You don't have any family left. You don't have any friends. What could possibly be more important than... That's enough." Vincent's voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath the words. "I don't answer to you, Frank. I don't answer to the Santinis. I run this organization, and if I say I had a personal emergency, then I had a personal emergency. Do you understand?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Frank said, "Yes, boss. I understand." "Good. Now set up another meeting with the Santinis tomorrow night. Tell them I'll explain everything then." "And what are you going to tell them?" Vincent looked toward the ceiling, toward the room where Margaret was taking her first bath in 2 years. "I haven't decided yet," he said, "but I'll think of something." He hung up and sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Frank was right to be concerned. The Santinis were not the kind of people you cancelled on without consequences. They would want an explanation, and they would want it to be good. But what could he tell them? The truth. That he had stopped his car for a homeless woman because something in her face had reminded him of his own mortality. That he had looked at her lying against that dumpster and seen a mirror of his own soul, broken, forgotten, waiting to die. They would think he had lost his mind. Maybe he had. There was a knock on his office door. Rosa entered, carrying a silver tray with a cup of tea. "She's in the bath," Rosa said, setting the tray on his desk. "I've laid out some clothes for her, some of your daughter's old things from the storage room. They should fit well enough." Vincent nodded. "Thank you, Rosa." "She asked about you," Rosa continued. "She wanted to know if you were going to come check on her. I told her you would give her privacy." "Good. That's good." Rosa hesitated. "Mr. Castellano, may I speak freely?" Vincent looked up at her. In 12 years, Rosa had never asked permission to speak. She just spoke her mind, whether he wanted to hear it or not. The fact that she was asking now meant this was something different. "Go ahead." "I've worked for you for a long time," Rosa said carefully. "I've seen you do many things. Some good, some not so good, but I've never seen you do anything like this." "Neither have I. What I'm trying to say is," Rosa paused, choosing her words, "whatever your reasons are, whatever made you stop for that woman today, I think it was the right thing to do, and I think you should keep doing it. Keep helping her, don't let the others talk you out of it." Vincent looked at his housekeeper for a long moment. Then he said, "Rosa, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I'm 53 years old. I've spent my entire adult life building this organization, making money, gaining power. And you know what I've realized?" "What?" "None of it matters. Not the money, not the power, not the respect. None of it has ever made me happy. Not for a single day." Rosa was quiet. She had suspected as much over the years, but hearing him say it out loud was something else entirely. "But today," Vincent continued, "when I saw Margaret take that money, when I saw her step into this house, when I saw her look at that bed, I felt something I haven't felt in years." "What did you feel?" Vincent smiled, and it was a strange smile, almost sad. "I felt like maybe I wasn't completely lost after all." Upstairs, Margaret was still. In the bath. The water had gone from steaming hot to pleasantly warm, and she had started to work on her hair. It was a slow process. The tangles were so thick and so matted that she had to use her fingers to pick them apart, one strand at a time. As she worked, she thought about the man downstairs, Vincent Castellano. She had heard that name before, on the streets. Everyone knew who Vincent Castellano was. He was the kind of man mothers warned their children about, the kind of man people crossed the street to avoid. And yet he had stopped for her. He had looked at her, really looked at her, and he had decided to help. Why? She did not understand. People like Vincent Castellano did not help people like her. People like Vincent Castellano stepped over people like her on their way to their expensive cars and their expensive meetings. People like Vincent Castellano did not see people like her at all. But he had seen her. He had said so himself. "I see you." 3 words. Just 3. Simple words. And yet they had broken something inside her. Some wall she had built up over 8 years of being invisible. 8 years of being treated like garbage. 8 years of being less than human. Margaret started to cry again. But this time, the tears did not feel hopeless. They felt like something else. They felt like relief. She worked on her hair for another hour, using her fingers and a comb that Rosa had left on the bathroom counter. Slowly, painfully, she began to separate the tangles, began to reveal the hair beneath. It was brown, a deep, rich brown, the same color as her eyes. She had forgotten that too. When the water finally grew too cold to bear, Margaret climbed out of the tub and wrapped herself in the thick white bathrobe hanging on the back of the door. It was the softest thing she had touched in years. She pressed her face against the fabric and breathed in the smell of clean laundry, and she felt something crack open in her chest. This is what normal people feel like, she thought. This is what it feels like to be human. Rosa had left clothes on the bed, a pair of jeans, a simple white blouse, and a cardigan in a soft shade of blue. They were not new, but they were clean and in good condition, and when Margaret put them on, they fit almost perfectly. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror by the closet. The transformation was not complete. Her face was still gaunt, her hair still damp and tangled despite her efforts. But she could see the beginning of something. She could see the outline of the woman she used to be, starting to emerge from beneath the wreckage. There was a gentle knock on the door. Rosa's voice came through. "Margaret, are you decent?" "Yes," Margaret called. "You can come in." Rosa entered carrying another tray, this one loaded with food. A bowl of soup, some fresh bread, a glass of orange juice, and a small plate of cookies. "I thought you might be hungry," Rosa said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "It's not much, but I didn't want to overwhelm your stomach. It's been a while since you've had a proper meal." Margaret stared at the food. Her stomach growled so loudly that both women heard it. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." She sat down and began to eat. The soup was chicken noodle, simple, warm, perfect. She had to force herself to slow down, to take small bites, to let her body adjust to the unfamiliar sensation of being full. Rosa watched her eat, and there was something in her eyes, something sad and knowing. "You know," Rosa said softly, "I wasn't always a housekeeper." Margaret looked up from her soup. 25 years ago, I was you." Rosa sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. "I was living on the streets in Miami. I had nothing, no family, no friends, no hope. I thought I was going to die out there." Margaret stopped eating. "What happened?" "A woman helped me. A stranger. She saw me sitting outside a restaurant, and instead of calling the police or ignoring me like everyone else, she invited me inside. She gave me a meal. She helped me find a shelter. And then she gave me a job." Rosa smiled at the memory. "She didn't have to do any of that. She didn't owe me anything. But she did it anyway because she believed that everyone deserved a second chance, even people like me." Margaret felt tears prick at her eyes again. "Where is she now, the woman who helped you?" "She passed away about 10 years ago, but I think about her every day. I try to live my life the way she would have wanted me to, with kindness, with compassion, with an open heart." Rosa reached out and took Margaret's hand. "What Mr. Castellano did for you today, picking you up, bringing you here, giving you a chance, that's not normal for him. He's a hard man, Margaret. He's done things I don't like to think about. But somewhere inside him, there's still goodness. I've always believed that. And I think you might be the person who helps him find it again." Margaret did not know what to say. She had come to this house expecting to be used, expecting to be hurt, expecting to be thrown back onto the streets the moment she outlived her usefulness. She had not expected kindness. She had not expected understanding. She had not expected to feel, for the first time in 8 years, like she might actually matter. "I don't know what to do," Margaret admitted. "I don't know how to be how to be a person again." "I've forgotten." Rosa squeezed her hand. "You don't have to figure it out all at once. Just take it one day at a time, 1 hour at a time if you need to, and know that you're not alone anymore. We're here to help you." Margaret nodded, wiping at her eyes with her free hand. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'll try. That's all anyone can ask." Downstairs, Vincent was still in his office, but he was no longer alone. Tony had returned from cancelling the Santini meeting, and he stood in front of Vincent's desk with his arms crossed and a worried expression on his face. "Boss, I got to tell you, the Santinis were not happy. Roberto Santini said some things I probably shouldn't repeat." "I don't care what Roberto Santini said." "You should care. He's talking about retaliation. He thinks you're trying to muscle in on their territory up north. He thinks this is the first move in some kind of campaign against them." Vincent laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the kind he rarely allowed himself. A campaign? I cancelled one meeting. One meeting, Tony, and he thinks it's a declaration of war? You know how these guys think. Everything is a message. Everything is a sign. If you're not with them, you're against them. Then let them think what they want. Vincent stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered garden. I'm tired of playing these games. I'm tired of pretending that any of this matters. Tony shifted uncomfortably. Boss, are you okay? Because you're not acting like yourself. First you pick up this homeless woman, then you cancel the Santini meeting. Now you're talking about being tired of the game. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were having some kind of breakdown. Vincent turned to look at his driver. Maybe I am, he said quietly. Maybe I've been having a breakdown for 30 years, and I'm only just now realizing it. Tony did not know how to respond to that. In 15 years, he had never heard his boss talk like this. Vincent Castellano was supposed to be made of stone. Vincent Castellano was supposed to be untouchable. Vincent Castellano was supposed to be the one person in the organization who never doubted, never wavered, never showed weakness. But the man standing in front of him now, this man did not look untouchable at all. This man looked lost. This man looked like he was searching for something he could not name. What do you want me to do, boss? Tony asked finally. Vincent thought about it. I want you to find out everything you can about Margaret, her full name, where she came from, how she ended up on the streets. Everything. You want me to investigate the homeless woman? I want to know who she was before. I want to know her story. Tony nodded slowly. Okay, boss, I'll see what I can dig up. And Tony? Yeah? Be discreet. I don't want anyone else knowing about this. Not Frank, not the Santinis, not anyone. This stays between us. Understood. Tony left, and Vincent turned back to the window. The snow was falling harder now, covering the garden in a fresh layer of white. It was beautiful in a cold sort of way. He thought about Margaret upstairs, eating her first real meal in months. He thought about Rosa's story, about the woman who had helped her all those years ago. He thought about his mother, who had died before she could teach him how to be good, and he wondered if it was too late. If 53 years of living the wrong way could ever be undone. But then he remembered Margaret's eyes, those brown eyes so full of fear and hope and something else, something that looked almost like trust, and he thought that maybe, just maybe, it was worth trying to find out. The next morning, Margaret woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. The bed was too soft, the room was too warm, the air smelled too clean. Then it all came flooding back. The man in the expensive coat, the car ride through, the city, the bath that had felt like being reborn. She sat up slowly, her muscles aching in unfamiliar ways. She had slept for 14 hours straight, the longest she had slept in years. Her body was still adjusting to the idea that it was safe, that it did not need to stay alert for danger. There was a knock at the door. Rosa's voice. Good morning, Margaret. Are you awake? Yes, Margaret called. Come in. Rosa entered, carrying yet another tray. This one held breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, and coffee. How did you sleep? Rosa asked, setting the tray on the table. I don't remember the last time I slept that well. Margaret swung her legs over the side of the bed, wincing at the stiffness in her joints. I kept waking up, thinking I was dreaming and then realizing I wasn't. Rosa smiled. You weren't dreaming. This is real. All of it. Margaret looked around the room, at the elegant furniture, the thick curtains, the painting on the wall of a countryside, seen in Italy, and shook her head. It doesn't feel real. It feels like I'm going to wake up any second and find myself back on that dumpster. Give it time. Your mind needs to catch up with your body. Margaret ate her breakfast slowly, savoring each bite. The eggs were fluffy and perfectly seasoned. The toast was crisp and buttered. The fruit was fresh and sweet. Simple things. Things she had taken for granted once upon a time. Things she had forgotten existed. Mr. Castellano would like to see you when you're finished eating, Rosa said. He's in his study on the first floor. I can show you the way. Margaret felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. What does he want? Just to talk, I think, to see how you're doing. Is he angry about something? Rosa shook her head. No, dear. He's not angry. He's concerned. He wants to make sure you're comfortable here. Margaret relaxed slightly. Okay, I'll come down after I finish. She ate the rest of her breakfast in silence, trying to calm her nerves. She had spent so many years expecting the worst from people that she did not know how to handle it when they treated her with kindness. It felt like a trick. It felt like a trap. It felt like the moment she let her guard down, everything would come crashing back to the way it was before. But Rosa seemed genuine. And Vincent was harder to read. He was clearly a dangerous man, a man who was used to getting what he wanted through intimidation and force. But there was something else in him too, something that softened when he looked at her. She finished her coffee and stood up. Okay, she said, I'm ready. Rosa led her downstairs, through a maze of hallways and rooms that all seemed to blend together in their elegance. The house was enormous, far too big for one person to live in alone, and Margaret found herself wondering if Vincent ever felt lost in it. The study was at the end of a long hallway on the ground floor. Rosa knocked on the door, waited for a response, then opened it and gestured for Margaret to enter. Vincent was sitting behind a massive wooden desk, papers spread out in front of him. He looked up when she entered, and his face transformed. The hard lines softened, and something that might have been a smile touched the corners of his mouth. Margaret, he said, please sit down. She sat in the chair across from his desk, her hands folded in her lap. The study was warm, heated by a fireplace in the corner, and the walls were lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. How are you feeling? Vincent asked. Better, Margaret said. Much better. Thank you for all of this. The room, the food, the clothes. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to repay me. That's not why I brought you here. Then why did you? I still don't understand. Vincent leaned back in his chair, studying her face. She looked different today, cleaner, more alert, more present. The bath had done wonders, for her skin and her hair, though still damp from a morning shower, was starting to reveal its natural shine. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, those brown eyes, so full of intelligence and pain and something else, something that reminded him of himself. Can I be honest with you, Margaret? I'd prefer that. I don't entirely understand it myself. Vincent looked down at his hands, then back up at her. I've spent my whole life taking from people, taking their money, taking their loyalty, taking their fear. I've never given anything away without expecting something in return. But yesterday, something changed. He shook his head. I can't explain it. I saw you lying there, against that dumpster, and I felt... I don't know what I felt. It was like looking into a mirror, like seeing what I would become if I kept going down this path. Margaret frowned. I don't think you and I are very much alike. No, we're both alone. We've both lost everything that matters. We've both spent years pretending that the pain doesn't exist. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. The only difference between us is that I have money. I have a roof over my head and food in my kitchen and people who pretend to respect me. But inside, he placed a hand over his chest. Inside, I'm just as empty as you were on those streets. Just as lost. Just as forgotten. Margaret stared at him. She had expected many things from this conversation, gratitude, perhaps, or conditions, for her continued stay. But she had not expected this. She had not expected vulnerability. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know where I'm coming from. I'm not doing this because I want something from you. I'm doing this because I want to be a different kind of person, and I thought that maybe if I helped you I could learn how. There was a long silence. The fire crackled in the corner. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Finally, Margaret spoke. What happened to you? She asked softly. What made you like this? Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he said, My mother died when I was 7. She was the only person who ever really loved me. After that, I was on my own. My father was a drunk. My brothers were no better. I learned pretty quickly that the only way to survive was to be harder than everyone else, to never let anyone see your weakness. So you built all this? Margaret gestured at the study, at the house, at everything around them. So I built all this, an empire made of fear and money, and you know what I learned? What? That you can have everything and still have nothing at all. If you are feeling something right now, if this story is touching your heart, leave a comment below. Just write, "This is the first story that has truly moved me." I want to know who is watching, who is feeling, who understands what it means to be seen. The days that followed were strange and wonderful, and terrifying all at once. Margaret slowly began to adjust to life in Vincent's house, but she never quite lost the feeling that she was dreaming, that at any moment she might wake up and find herself back on the streets. Rosa became her constant companion, teaching her how to navigate the house, introducing her to the other staff members, helping her establish a routine. Breakfast at 8, a walk in the garden at noon, lunch at 1, reading or resting in the afternoon, dinner at 7. It was the kind of structured existence that Margaret had not experienced in nearly a decade, and at first it felt suffocating. She was used to having no schedule, no obligations, no expectations. She was used to waking up whenever her body demanded it and sleeping wherever she could find a safe corner. But gradually she began to appreciate the routine. She began to look forward to meals, to conversations with Rosa, to the quiet hours she spent in the library with a book in her hands. She was starting to remember what it felt like to be a person. Vincent, meanwhile, was dealing with the fallout from the Santini situation. The rescheduled meeting had gone poorly. Roberto Santini had demanded an explanation for the cancelled appointment, and Vincent had given him one that was vague enough to be insulting. "I had a personal matter to attend to," Vincent had said. "It couldn't wait." "A personal matter?" Roberto had repeated, his eyes narrowing. "What kind of personal matter?" "The kind that's none of your business." The meeting had deteriorated from there. Roberto had made veiled threats. Vincent had responded with threats of his own. By the end, both men were standing, voices raised, hands inches from the weapons they carried beneath their jackets. Tony had finally stepped between them, reminding everyone that they were supposed to be allies, not enemies. The meeting had ended without resolution. Roberto Santini had left with murder in his eyes, and Vincent had returned home to find Margaret in the garden watching the birds at the feeder. "You look troubled," she said as he approached. Vincent sat down on the bench beside her. "Business complications," he said. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Is it dangerous?" He considered lying to her, but something about those brown eyes made dishonesty feel impossible. "It might be," he admitted. "There are people who don't like me, people who would be happy to see me fall." "Because of what you do? Your business?" "Yes." Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I used to have enemies too when I was living on the streets. Other homeless people who wanted my spot or my things, or just wanted to hurt someone because they were hurting too." "How did you handle them?" "I learned to be invisible." She smiled sadly. "I learned to make myself so small and so quiet that people would forget I existed. It was the only way to survive." Vincent looked at her. At this woman, who had made herself invisible for 8 years, who had spent nearly a decade being forgotten by the world, and he felt that ache in his chest again, that shame. "You shouldn't have to be invisible," he said quietly. "No one should." "Maybe not. But it kept me alive." They sat in silence for a while, watching the birds. A cardinal landed on the feeder, its red feathers bright against the grey sky. "Can I ask you something?" Vincent said. "Of course." "When you were out there, on the streets, did you ever give up hope? Did you ever think about just ending it?" Margaret did not answer right away. She watched the cardinal for a long moment, then said, "Every day. Every single day I thought about it. I thought about how easy it would be to just stop fighting, to let go." What kept you going? She turned to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes. I don't know, she said. I really don't know. There was just something inside me, some stubborn, stupid part of me that refused to give up. That kept saying one. More day, Margaret. Just one more day. I'm glad, Vincent said softly. I'm glad you didn't give up. So am I. She reached out and placed her hand on top of his. So am I. It was a simple gesture, just her hand on his, but it felt like the most intimate moment Vincent had experienced in years. He could feel the warmth of her skin, could feel the slight tremor in her fingers, could feel the trust that she was placing in him. And he realized, with a shock that ran through his entire body, that he did not want to let her down. That night, Vincent made a decision. He called Tony into his office and gave him instructions that made the driver's eyebrows nearly disappear into his hairline. You want me to what? I want you to arrange a makeover for Margaret, the best salon in the city, hair, makeup, nails, everything. And then I want you to take her shopping, whatever she wants, whatever she needs. Price is no object. Tony stared at his boss like he had grown a second head. Boss, you realize how this looks, right? You pick up a homeless woman off the street, you bring her into your house, and now you're spending a fortune to make her beautiful. I don't care how it looks. People are going to talk. They're going to say you've lost your mind. They're going to say, let them say whatever they want. Vincent's voice was calm but firm. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're throwing away everything you've built for a woman. You met 3 days ago. Vincent leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Tony's. Let me tell you something, Tony. Everything I've built, it's meaningless. It's a house of cards that could collapse at any moment. The money, the power, the respect, none of it will matter when I'm dead. None of it will follow me into the grave. Then what will? Kindness, compassion, the knowledge that I did something good with my life, even if it was just one thing. Even if it was just helping one person who had lost everything. Tony was silent for a long moment. Then he said, You really care about her, don't you? I do. And you don't want anything from her in return? No. Tony shook his head slowly. I've known you for 15 years, boss. I've seen you do a lot of things. Some of them I'm not proud to have been part of, but this, he paused. This might be the best thing you've ever done. Vincent smiled. It was a small smile, almost shy. I hope so, he said. I really hope so. Makeover was scheduled for the following week. Margaret was nervous, more nervous than she had been in years, but Rosa helped calm her down, reminding her that this was a gift, not an obligation. Mr. Castellano wants to see you thrive, Rosa said, as she helped Margaret into the car that would take her to the salon. He wants to see you become the woman you were meant to be. But what if I can't? Margaret's voice was small, frightened. What if I've been broken for too long? What if I can't put myself back together? Rosa took her face in her hands, looked her straight in the eyes. Listen to me, Margaret. You are not broken. You are not damaged goods. You are a survivor. You have endured things that would have destroyed most people, and you're still here, still fighting, still hoping. She released her grip, stepped back. The woman inside you, the woman who existed before the streets, before the pain, she's still there. She's been waiting all this time for a chance to come back. And this is her chance. Margaret nodded, wiping at her eyes. Okay, she said. Okay, I'll try. That's all anyone can ask. The salon was in the heart of downtown Chicago, a sleek, modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a minimalist design that screamed expensive. Margaret felt out of place the moment she walked through the door, even though she was wearing clothes that Rosa had helped her pick out. But the staff treated her like royalty. They brought her tea and pastries while she waited. They asked about her preferences, her concerns, her hopes. They listened with genuine interest when she told them, hesitantly, uncertainly, that she did not really know what she wanted because she had not thought about her appearance in so long. That's okay, the head stylist said. She was a woman in her 40s with striking silver hair and eyes that seemed to see right through Margaret. We'll figure it out together. The process took hours. First came the hair, washing it 3 times to get all the residue out, then cutting away the damage, then coloring it a rich warm brown that brought out the gold in her eyes. Then came the facial, which made her skin feel like new, then the manicure and pedicure, which transformed her ragged nails into something elegant. And finally the makeup, subtle but effective, enhancing her natural features rather than covering them up. When Margaret looked in the mirror at the end, she could not breathe. The woman staring back at her was a stranger. No, not a stranger. A ghost, a memory, a dream she had given up on long ago. "Oh my God," she whispered. The stylist smiled. "There she is. There's the woman you've been hiding from all these years." Margaret reached out and touched the mirror, as if she needed to confirm that the reflection was real. The woman in the mirror reached out too, her perfectly manicured fingers meeting Margaret's. "I look—" She could not find the words. Her voice broke. "I look like myself. I look like myself again." Tears started streaming down her face, but she was smiling. For the first time in 8 years, Margaret was smiling. The shopping trip that followed was a blur. Tony took her to store after store, watching with barely concealed amazement as the formerly homeless woman tried on designer clothes, elegant dresses, sophisticated pantsuits. She moved through the boutiques like someone in a trance, touching fabrics she had forgotten existed, trying on shoes that cost more than she had earned in her entire previous life. "Mr. Castellano said to get whatever you want," Tony reminded her when she hesitated over a particularly beautiful evening gown. "He meant it." "But this is so expensive." "He doesn't care about the expense, he cares about you." Margaret looked at herself in the mirror, at the woman she had become, the woman she had always been underneath the dirt and the despair, and made a decision. "I'll take it," she said. By the time they returned to the house, Margaret had enough new clothes to fill an entire closet. She had bags upon bags of dresses, blouses, pants, jackets, shoes, accessories. She had makeup and skincare products and perfumes that smelled like heaven. And she had something else too, something that could not be bought. She had confidence. Vincent was waiting in the foyer when she walked through the front door. He had been pacing for the past hour, anxious in a way he had not felt since he was a young man trying to prove himself in a world that wanted to chew him up and spit him out. Then Margaret appeared and everything stopped. She was wearing one of the new outfits, a simple but elegant dress in deep blue, paired with heels that made her already tall frame even more striking. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Her skin glowed, her eyes sparkled. She was beautiful, stunningly, breathtakingly beautiful. Vincent felt like he had been punched in the chest. "Margaret," he said, and his voice came out as barely a whisper. She smiled at him, a real smile, full and warm and alive. "Well?" she asked. "What do you think?" He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He had spent his entire life dealing with difficult situations, negotiating with dangerous people, making decisions that affected thousands of lives. But none of that had prepared him for this moment. None of that had prepared him to see Margaret, his Margaret, the woman he had found against a dumpster, transformed into someone so radiant that she seemed to light up the room. "You're perfect," he finally managed. "You're absolutely perfect." Margaret's smile widened, but there were tears in her eyes. "I forgot what this felt like," she said softly. "I forgot what it felt like to be seen as beautiful, to be seen as human." "You were always human," Vincent said, stepping closer. "You were always beautiful. The world just stopped looking. And you looked. I looked." They stood there for a long moment, gazing at each other. The air between them was charged with something, emotion, tension, possibility. Then Rosa appeared from the kitchen, clapping her hands together in delight. "Oh, Margaret, you look wonderful. I knew you would. I just knew it." The moment broke. Margaret laughed, wiping at her tears, and Rosa rushed forward to embrace her. Tony retreated to a corner, clearly uncomfortable with all the emotion. But Vincent stayed where he was, watching Margaret, thinking about how much had changed in just a few weeks, and wondering what the future might hold. The transformation did not go unnoticed. Within days, word had spread through Chicago's underworld that Vincent Castellano had taken in a homeless woman, had spent a fortune on her makeover, had given her a place in his home. The rumors ranged from the mundane to the scandalous. Some said she was his new mistress. Others said she was a long-lost relative. A few even suggested that she was some kind of con artist who had manipulated the old man into giving her everything she wanted. Roberto Santini heard the rumors and saw an opportunity. "He's gone soft," Roberto told his brothers during a meeting at their headquarters on the north side. "Picking up bums off the street, playing house with some woman who probably has more lice than brain cells. This is our chance to move against him." "You sure that's smart?" his younger brother Marco asked. "Castellano's still got a lot of men loyal to him, and he's got resources we don't. Resources mean nothing if the man controlling them has lost his edge." Roberto leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "I've been waiting for this moment for 15 years, waiting for Castellano to slip up, to show weakness. And now he has. We have to strike while we can." "What do you have in mind?" Roberto smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "I'm going to take something from him, something he cares about, and then we'll see how soft he really is." The attack came 2 weeks later. Margaret had developed a routine by then. Every morning she would walk in the garden, enjoying the fresh air and the quiet. It was the best part of her day, a time when she could be alone with her thoughts, could process everything that had happened to her, could marvel at how drastically her life had changed. She was walking among the rose bushes when the men appeared. There were 4 of them, dressed in black, faces hidden behind ski masks. They moved fast and efficiently, like they had practiced this 100 times. Before Margaret could scream, one of them had a hand over her mouth and another was binding her wrists. "Don't fight," a voice hissed in her ear. "Don't make a sound, and maybe you'll live through this." They dragged her to a van waiting on the other side of the garden wall. She tried to struggle, tried to break free, but she was weak from years of malnutrition and no match for 4 trained men. Within seconds, she was in the back of the van, a hood over her head, the vehicle speeding away from the only home she had known in nearly a decade. Vincent found out an hour later. Rosa came running into his office, pale and trembling, with the news that Margaret was gone. There were signs of a struggle in the garden. The security cameras had been disabled. For a moment, Vincent could not breathe. The world seemed to narrow to a single point of white-hot rage. "Who?" he said, and his voice was ice. "We don't know yet. Tony's looking into it. Find out. Find out now." Rosa fled. Vincent stood alone in his office, his hands shaking, his heart pounding. They had taken her. Someone had taken Margaret. And whoever it was, they were going to pay. Tony's investigation was swift and brutal. Within 3 hours, they had a name. Roberto Santini. Within 4 hours, they had a location. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Vincent gathered his men. All of them. Every soldier, every associate, every person who owed him loyalty. "They took someone from me," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "They came into my home and they took someone I care about. And now we're going to get her back." The men looked at each other. They had seen Vincent angry before, but never like this. Never with this cold, quiet fury that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a furnace. "What about the Santinis?" someone asked. "This could start a major confrontation." "Then let it start." Vincent's eyes swept across the crowd. "I've spent 30 years building this organization. I've spent 30 years avoiding unnecessary conflict, playing the long game, being patient. But there are some things that patience cannot accept. There are some lines that cannot be crossed." He paused. "They crossed that line, they took Margaret, and now they're going to learn what happens when you hurt the people I love." The word hung in the air. Love. Vincent had said love. The men exchanged glances. In 30 years they had never heard their boss use that word. "Move out," Vincent said. "We leave in 15 minutes." The warehouse was surrounded within the hour. Vincent's men took up positions at every entrance, every window, every possible escape route. Snipers climbed to nearby rooftops. Cars blocked the roads leading to and from the building. Inside, Roberto Santini was starting to realize that he might have made a serious miscalculation. "How many men are out there?" he demanded. "At least 50, one of his soldiers reported. "Maybe more. They've got the whole place locked down." 50 for one woman? Roberto shook his head. Castellano's lost his mind. Maybe so. But that doesn't change the fact that we're surrounded. Roberto looked at Margaret, who was tied to a chair in the center of the room. She had stopped struggling hours ago. Her face was calm, almost serene. "You don't look scared," Roberto said. "I've been through worse." "Really? Because I was under the impression that you were just some homeless bum." Castellano picked up off the street. "I was homeless," Margaret said, "but I was never just a bum, and Vincent is going to destroy you for this." Roberto laughed. "Vincent? You're on a first-name basis with the boss of the South Side? That's cute." "He's more than my boss. He's my friend, and he's going to tear you apart." Before Roberto could respond, his phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, then went pale. "It's Castellano," he said to his men. "He wants to talk." The conversation was short. Vincent made his terms clear. Release Margaret unharmed, and he would let Roberto and his men walk away. Refuse, and no one would walk away. "You're bluffing," Roberto said. "You attack this warehouse, she dies first. Then you die second, and your brothers die third, and everyone you've ever loved dies after that." Vincent's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I have unlimited resources and unlimited patience. I can make your life a living nightmare for as long as you remain alive. And when you finally beg for death, I'll keep you breathing just to make you suffer more." There was a long silence. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Roberto asked finally. "You don't. But you know what happens if you don't take the deal. So ask yourself, is one woman really worth everything you've built? Is she worth your life, your brothers' lives? Everything?" Another silence. Then Roberto said, "Fine. You win. She walks out in 5 minutes." True to his word, the warehouse door opened 5 minutes later, and Margaret emerged, blinking in the afternoon sunlight. She looked tired and scared, but she was unharmed. Vincent was there to meet her. He wrapped his arms around her and held her close, feeling her body tremble against his. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you. You're safe now." "I knew you would come," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I knew you would find me. Always. I will always find you." They stood there for a long time, holding each other, while Vincent's men maintained their positions around the warehouse. Roberto Santini and his soldiers remained inside, waiting to see if Vincent would keep his promise. He did. Once Margaret was safely in his car, Vincent gave the order for his men to withdraw. The Santinis were allowed to leave, but it was not over. Not by a long shot. "We can't let this stand," Frank De Luca said during a meeting later that night. "Roberto Santini kidnapped a woman from your own home. If we don't respond, we look weak. Everyone in the city will think they can take shots at us." Vincent looked around the room at his assembled lieutenants. They were all waiting for his decision, all expecting him to authorize violence against the Santinis. "You're right," Vincent said slowly. "We do need to respond." Frank nodded eagerly. "I've already got plans drawn up. We can hit their distribution network first, then—" "That's not the kind of response I'm talking about." The room went quiet. "What do you mean, boss?" Tony asked. Vincent stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars. "I've spent 30 years building this organization," he said. 30 years of violence and intimidation and fear. And where has it gotten me? I have enemies who want to destroy me. I have associates who would betray me the moment they thought they could get away with it. I have no family, no real friends, no one who cares about me as a person rather, than as a source of money and power. He turned to face the room. Margaret changed something in me. She made me see that there's another way to live. A better way. "Boss," Frank said carefully, "are you saying you want to go straight?" "No, I'm saying I'm done, I'm out." The room erupted. Men shouted, argued, pleaded. They had invested their entire lives in this organization. They had done terrible things in Vincent's name. And now he was telling them it was all for nothing? "Listen to me!" Vincent's voice cut through the chaos. "I'm not abandoning you. I'm not leaving you to fend for yourselves. I've already made arrangements. The organization will continue, but under new leadership. Frank will take over. He'll run things the way they've always been run." "And what about you?" Tony asked quietly. Vincent smiled. It was a real smile, maybe the first real smile he had shown his men in decades. "I'm going to live," he said. "For the first time in my life, I'm really going to live." The transition took months. There were complications, setbacks, moments when Vincent thought the whole thing might fall apart. But eventually, Frank DeLuca took control of the organization, and Vincent Castellano faded into the background. He sold the mansion. "Too many memories," he said. "Too many ghosts." He bought a smaller house outside the city, a simple place with a garden and a view of the lake. Margaret came with him. They were not lovers, not at first. They were something more complicated. Friends, companions, two broken people trying to heal together. Margaret was still dealing with the trauma of her years on the streets. Vincent was still unlearning a lifetime of violence and cynicism, but they were there for each other, every day. Through good times and bad times, through nightmares and breakthroughs, through all the hard work of becoming the people they wanted to be. And eventually, slowly, something else grew between them. It started with small things, a touch that lingered, a moment too long. A glance across the dinner table that meant more than words could say. A conversation that stretched late into the night, neither of them wanting it to end. One evening, about a year after they had left the city, Vincent finally found the courage to say what he had been feeling for months. "I love you, Margaret." She looked at him, her brown eyes shining. "I know," she said. "You know? I've known for a while. I was just waiting for you to figure it out." He laughed, a real laugh, full and warm and surprised. "Am I that transparent?" "You're the least transparent person I've ever met," she said, "but I've learned to read between the lines." She reached out and took his hand. "I love you too, Vincent. I think I have since that first day when you stopped your car and looked at me like I was a person instead of an inconvenience. You were never an inconvenience. You were a wake-up call." "A wake-up call?" "A reminder that life is short and precious and not worth wasting on things that don't matter." He squeezed her hand. "You saved me, Margaret. You might not realize it, but you saved me." "We saved each other," she said softly. And that, Vincent thought, was the truth. They had saved each other. Two lost souls who had found their way back to the light. The years that followed were the happiest of Vincent's life. He and Margaret got married in a small ceremony by the lake, with Rosa as the maid of honor and Tony as the best man. They traveled together, seeing the world, experiencing things that both of them had dreamed about but never thought they would have. Margaret went back to school, earning the degree she had abandoned years ago when her life fell apart. She became a social worker, dedicating herself to helping others who had fallen through the cracks of society. Vincent started a foundation. He donated millions to homeless shelters, soup kitchens, job training programs. He used his connections, the legitimate ones he had cultivated, over the years, to raise awareness about homelessness and poverty. He became improbably a philanthropist, and every year, on the anniversary of the day they met, Vincent and Margaret would drive back to Chicago. They would find the spot where she had been sleeping against that dumpster, and they would stand there together, remembering. "Can you believe it?" Margaret would say. "Can you believe how far we've come?" "Sometimes I still think I'm dreaming," Vincent would reply. "Sometimes I wake, up in the middle of the night and reach for you, just to make sure you're still there. I'm still here, I'll always be here. And I'll always find you. No matter what happens, no matter how far we drift, I'll always find you." They would hold hands and walk back to their car, leaving the past behind, moving toward the future, together. But life, as they both knew, is never a straight line. When Vincent was 67 years old, his heart began to fail. Years of stress and unhealthy living had taken their toll, and no amount of money or good intentions could undo the damage. Margaret was with him through every doctor's appointment, every test, every moment of hope and despair. She held his hand during the bad nights, whispered encouragement during the good days, and refused to let him give up. "You're not allowed to die," she told him, her voice fierce despite the tears streaming down her face. "You hear me? You're not allowed to leave me." "I'm trying," Vincent said weakly. "Believe." "Me, I'm trying. Try harder." He did. He tried harder than he had ever tried at anything in his life. He changed his diet, started gentle exercises, took every medication the doctors prescribed. He fought with everything he had. But some fights cannot be won. On a cool October evening, with the leaves turning gold and red outside the window, Vincent Castellano died peacefully in his sleep. Margaret was beside him, her hand in his, as he took his last breath. She did not scream. She did not cry. She just sat there, holding his hand, watching the light fade from the face of the man who had saved her life. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for everything." And then finally, she let herself grieve. The funeral was small but well attended. Former associates came to pay their respects, as did the many people Vincent had helped over the years, homeless individuals he had supported, social workers from Margaret's organization, community, leaders who had benefited from his foundation. Rosa gave the eulogy. She spoke about the man Vincent had been when she first met him, hard, cold, dangerous, and the man he had become at the end, warm, generous, full of love. "He was not a perfect person," Rosa said. "He made mistakes. He hurt people. He did things he was not proud of, but in the end, he chose to be better. He chose to change. And that choice, that brave and difficult choice, is what we celebrate today." Margaret spoke last. She stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered mourners, and told the story of how they met. The dumpster, the Mercedes, the 3 words that had changed everything. "I see you." "Vincent saw me when no one else did," she said. "He reached out his hand when everyone else walked by. He gave me a second chance at life, and then he spent the rest of his life making sure I never forgot how valuable that life was." She paused, wiping at her eyes. "I loved him. More than I ever thought I could. Love anyone. And I know wherever he is right now, he loves me too." She looked up at the ceiling, as if she could see through it to the sky beyond. "Find peace, my love," she said softly. "You've earned it." After the funeral, Margaret went home to the house by the lake. She sat on the porch where she and Vincent had spent so many evenings, watching the sun set over the water, and she let herself remember. She remembered the fear she had felt when she first woke up in his mansion. She remembered the confusion, the disbelief, the slow dawning of hope. She remembered the makeover and the shopping trip, and the moment Vincent had told her she was perfect. She remembered the kidnapping and the rescue, and the way he had held her afterwards, like he would never let go. She remembered their wedding, their travels, their years of quiet happiness. She remembered his smile, his laugh, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was truly amused. And she remembered his voice, that last night, when he had been too weak to do more than whisper. "Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for giving me a reason to be good." The sun sank below the horizon. The stars came out one by one. Margaret sat on the porch, wrapped in memories, and she smiled through her tears. She was alone again. But she was not the same person she had been all those years ago, sleeping against a dumpster, waiting to die. She was Margaret Castellano. She was loved. She was remembered. She was real. And she would carry Vincent's memory with her for the rest of her life, a light against the darkness, a reminder that even the most broken people can be healed. If you watched until now, it is because this story touched your heart. Leave a comment saying, "I watched until here," so that I can know who really appreciates the stories on this channel. If you like this video, leave a like. It helps more than you can imagine, and if you think someone else needs to hear this story, share it with them. You never know whose life might be changed by a simple act of kindness. Subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed yet, because every week we bring you stories that will make you laugh, cry, and think about what really matters in life. And remember, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, always. The Mafia boss ordered an ugly, dirty, homeless woman a bath, and the before and after paralyzed the entire city. But the real transformation was not in her face. It was in his heart, and that in the end is what matters most. 3 years after Vincent's death, Margaret received an unexpected phone call. Mrs. Castellano, this is Detective Rebecca Morrison from the Chicago Police Department. I'm calling about a case that may involve your late husband. Margaret sat down heavily in her kitchen chair. What kind of case? We've been investigating a series of charitable foundations that have been helping homeless individuals across the Midwest. The FBI flagged several large anonymous donations that traced back to shell companies owned by your husband's estate. We were wondering if you could help us understand the nature of these transactions. Margaret felt a smile spreading across her face. Detective Morrison, I think I can explain everything. She told the detective about Vincent's foundation, about the millions he had donated over the years, about his mission to help others who had fallen through society's cracks. By the time she finished, the detective was silent. So all this money, Detective Morrison said slowly, was just charity. Just charity. Nothing illegal. Just a man trying to make up for the things he did in his past. I see. There was a long pause. Mrs. Castellano, I have to tell you something. I've been on the force for 20 years. I've seen a lot of bad people try to clean up their images with charitable donations, but I've never seen anything like this. The scope of what your husband did. It's remarkable. He was a remarkable man. Clearly. Another pause. I'm going to close this investigation. There's nothing here worth pursuing. But I wanted you to know, if more people were like your husband, my job would be a lot easier. After she hung up, Margaret sat for a long time, thinking. Vincent's legacy was still out there, still helping people, still making a difference. Even in death, he was finding ways to be good. She decided to continue his work. She expanded the foundation, brought in new partners, launched programs in cities across the country. She traveled to homeless shelters and soup kitchens, meeting the people her husband's money had helped, hearing their stories, and everywhere she went, she told them about Vincent. About the man who had stopped his car for a woman sleeping against a dumpster, about the love that had grown from that single act of kindness, about the transformation that had changed both of their lives. He wasn't a saint, she would say. He wasn't even a good man for most of his life, but he chose to be better, and that choice changed everything. The people she met were inspired. Volunteers signed up. Donations poured in. The foundation grew and grew until it was one of the largest homeless assistance organizations in the country. And Margaret, who had once been invisible, became a beacon of hope for thousands of people who felt forgotten by the world. On her 70th birthday, Margaret received a letter. It was from a young woman named Sarah who lived in Detroit. Dear Mrs. Castellano, the letter read, I was homeless for 4 years. I had given up hope. I thought I was going to die on the streets, alone and forgotten. Then I found the Castellano Foundation. They gave me a place to stay, helped me get clean, supported me while I got my life back together. Now I have a job, an apartment, and a future I never thought I'd have. I know your husband started this foundation, and I know he's passed away, but I wanted you to know that he saved my life, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Margaret read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the lake where the sun was setting in a blaze of gold and orange. Did you hear that, Vincent? She whispered. You're still saving people. You're still making a difference. The wind rustled through the trees. The water sparkled in the fading light. and Margaret could have sworn she heard Vincent's voice, carried on the breeze, saying the words he had said to her so many years ago. "I see you." 10 years later, Margaret Castellano passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the people she loved. She was buried next to her husband, in a small cemetery overlooking the lake where they had spent so many happy years. Her tombstone bore a simple inscription: "She was seen. She was loved. She made a difference." The Castellano Foundation continued its work, carrying on the legacy of the unlikely couple who had found redemption in each other. Every year, on the anniversary of Vincent's death, Foundation staff would gather to remember the man who had started it all. They would tell the story of the Mafia boss and the homeless woman, the story of transformation and love, the story of two lost souls who had found their way back to the light, and they would remind each other, and anyone who would listen, that it is never too late to change, never too late to choose kindness, never too late to see the people around you who have been forgotten by the world. Because everyone deserves to be seen, everyone deserves a second chance. And sometimes, the most unlikely people are the ones who help us find it. The Mafia boss ordered an ugly, dirty, homeless woman a bath, and the before and after paralyzed the entire city. But the real miracle was not the transformation of her face. It was the transformation of two hearts. And that is a story worth telling forever. In the years that followed Margaret's death, the Castellano Foundation became a model for charitable organizations around the world. Social workers, politicians, and philanthropists studied its methods, trying to understand how a single act of kindness had snowballed into a movement that helped millions. Rosa, who had stayed with the foundation until she could no longer work, gave interviews well into her 90s. She told the same stories over and over. The day Margaret arrived at the mansion, the makeover, the kidnapping, the wedding by the lake. And every time, audiences were moved to tears. "People ask me what the secret was," Rosa said in one of her final interviews. "They want to know how Vincent and Margaret did it, how they built something so beautiful from such a broken beginning. And I always tell them the same thing." She paused, her eyes twinkling with memory. The secret was simple. They saw each other, truly saw each other, not as problems to be solved or opportunities to be exploited, as human beings, as people worthy of love and dignity and respect. She leaned forward in her chair. That's all any of us really want, isn't it? To be seen, to be known, to matter to someone. Vincent saw Margaret when no one else did, and Margaret saw Vincent, the real Vincent, the man behind the reputation, the scared little boy who had spent his whole life building walls to protect himself. They saved each other by seeing each other, and then they spent the rest of their lives helping other people be seen too. Rosa died 2 years later, at the age of 94. She was buried near Vincent and Margaret, in the same little cemetery overlooking the lake. Tony, who had long since retired from the life he had led as Vincent's driver, came to the funeral. He stood at the graveside, looking at the 3 tombstones lined up in a row, and he remembered. He remembered the day Vincent had stopped the car for Margaret, the confusion he had felt, the certainty that his boss had lost his mind, and he remembered what had come after, the transformation, the love, the redemption. "You were right, boss," Tony said quietly. "You were right about everything." The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance a bird sang. Tony turned and walked away, leaving the past behind, moving toward whatever future remained for him, but he carried the story with him, and he told it to anyone who would listen. The story of the Mafia boss and the homeless woman, the story of transformation and love, the story of 2 people who had found each other against all odds and had changed the world in the process. It is a story that deserves to be told forever, because it reminds us that no one is beyond redemption, no one is too lost to be found, and no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Remember that the next time you see someone who has been forgotten by the world, remember Vincent Castellano, who stopped his car for a woman sleeping against a dumpster. Remember Margaret, who took a chance on a man everyone else feared. Remember that love can grow in the most unlikely places, and remember that sometimes All it takes to change someone's life is 3 simple words. I see you, E.